Yellowstone National Park, the oldest, one of the largest, and probably the best-known national park in the United States. It is situated principally in northwestern Wyoming and partly in southern Montana and eastern Idaho, and includes the greatest concentration of hydrothermal features in the world. The park was established by the U.S. Congress on March 1, 1872, as the country's first national park. It is also generally considered to have been the first national park in the world, though some naturalists and others have argued that there is evidence that indicates that the creation of Yellowstone was predated by the creation of Bogd Khan Mountain National Park in Mongolia, which may date from as early as 1778. Yellowstone was designated a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve in 1976 and a World Heritage Site in 1978. The park, which forms a square-like rectangle with an irregular eastern side, is 63 miles, 101 kilometer, from north to south, and 54 miles, 87 kilometers from east to west at its widest point, and covers an area of 3,472 square miles, 8,992 square kilometers. The John D. Rockefeller Jr. Memorial Parkway, an 80-mile, 130-kilometer scenic roadway that was established in 1972, connects Yellowstone with Grand Teton National Park to the south. In addition, Yellowstone is surrounded by Gallatin, northwest and north, Custer, northeast, Shoshone, northeast and east, Bridger Teton, southeast and south, and Caribou-Targhee, southwest national forests. Headquarters are at Mammoth Hot Springs near the northern entrance to the park. Yellowstone is situated in a region that has been volcanically and seismically active for tens of millions of years. Tectonic movement of the North American plate has thinned Earth's crust in the area, forming a hotspot, a place where a dome of magma or molten rock comes close to the surface. About 2.1 million years ago, a subsurface magma dome that had been building up in the Yellowstone area blew up in one of the world's most cataclysmic volcanic eruptions. Some 600 cubic miles, 2,500 cubic km of rock and ash were ejected, equivalent to about 6,000 times the amount of volcanic material that was released during the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. Observations made in the early 21st century indicated that this single eruption actually consisted of two events about 6,000 years apart, one very large and a second much smaller one. Subsequent massive eruptions occurred about 100,000 and 640,000 years ago. The last event, consisting in large part of lava flows, producing about 2/5 as much material as the first one. Yellowstone Lake, Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming Yellowstone Lake. Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming northern end of Yellowstone Lake, within Yellowstone Caldera, Yellowstone National Park, northwestern Wyoming, U.S. Each of those eruptions caused the magma dome that had built up to collapse as its contents were released, leaving an enormous caldera. The present-day Yellowstone caldera, the product of the third eruption, is a roughly oval-shaped basin some 30 by 45 miles, 50 by 70 kilometers, that occupies the west-central portion of the national park and includes the northern two-thirds of Yellowstone Lake. Two resurgent magma domes, one just north of and the other just west of Yellowstone Lake, have been forming in the caldera, and the western dome underlie many of the park's best-known hydrothermal features. The Yellowstone region is also extremely active seismically. A network of faults associated with the region's volcanic history underlies the park's surface, and the region experiences hundreds of small earthquakes each year. The great majority of those quakes are of magnitude 2.0 or less, and are not felt by people in the area, but occasionally a more powerful temblor will strike in the region and have effects in the park. One such event, a deadly quake that struck in 1959 in southern Montana, just outside the northwestern corner of the park, affected a number of hydrothermal features in Yellowstone, including its iconic geyser, Old Faithful. Yellowstone's relief is the result of tectonic activity, volcanism and earthquakes, combined with the erosional actions of ice and water. Most of the park consists of broad volcanic plateaus with an average elevation of about 7,175 feet, 2,400 meters. Three mountain ranges, each aligned roughly north to south, protrude into the park. The Gallatin Range in the northwest, the Absaroka Range in the east, and the northern extremity of the Teton Range along the park's southwestern boundary. The tallest mountains in the park are in the Absarokas, where many summits exceed elevations of 10,000 feet, 3,050 meters. The range's Eagle Peak, on the park's boundary in the southeast, is the high point, reaching 11,358 feet, 3,162 meters. Aside from its rugged mountains and spectacular deep glacier-carved valleys, the park has unusual geologic features, including fossil forests, eroded basaltic lava flows, a black obsidian, volcanic glass, mountain, and odd erosional forms. Lower falls of the Yellowstone River, Yellowstone National Park, northwestern Wyoming, U.S. Lower falls of the Yellowstone River, Yellowstone National Park, northwestern Wyoming, U.S. Yellowstone is also known for its many scenic lakes and rivers. The park's largest body of water is Yellowstone Lake, which, having a surface area of 132 square miles, 342 square km, and lying at an elevation of 7,130 feet, 2,356 meters, is the highest mountain lake of its size in North America. The West Thumb area, a knob-like protrusion of the lake on its west side, was formed by a relatively small eruption in the caldera about 150,000 years ago. The next largest lake, Shoshone Lake, lies in the caldera southwest of Yellowstone Lake. The park's most extensive drainage system is that of the Yellowstone River, which enters at the southeast corner, flows generally northward, including through Yellowstone Lake, and exits near the northwest corner of the park. The river's Yellowstone Falls, located in the north-central part of the park, descend in two majestic cascades. The Upper Falls, with a drop of 114 feet, 35 meters, and the Lower Falls, with a drop of 308 feet, 94 meters.
Yellowstone's climate can be described as cool, temperate, and continental. It is also considerably variable, influenced by the park's high average elevation, relatively high latitude, location deep within the continent, and mountainous terrain. In general, the north-central portion of Yellowstone tends to have wetter summers and drier winters than the rest of the park, where the moisture regimens are reversed. Temperatures almost always decrease with elevation gain. Because of Yellowstone's large area and variegated topography, weather conditions at different locations within the park can vary widely at any given time. In addition, conditions can change dramatically in a short period of time at one location. Summer days are warm and relatively sunny, with daytime temperatures reaching about 80 degrees 27 degrees C in July at lower elevations, before dropping to nighttime lows in the 40s or 50s F, about 10 degrees C. Temperatures are usually cooler higher in the mountains. Although precipitation totals in the warm months generally are light, summer afternoon thunderstorms are common. Winters are cold and snowy, as temperatures rarely rise above the mid-20s F, about 4 degrees, and often drop to 0 degrees F, 18 degrees C, or lower at night. Annual precipitation amounts vary with location and elevation, being lowest in the north, about 10 inches, 250 millimeters, and highest on the western slopes of the northern Teton foothills, about 80 inches, 2,000 meters. Snowfall is heavy in most areas, especially at higher elevations, and typically begins in early autumn and continues into April or May. Some 1,450 species of flowering plants, roughly 150 of them native, have been identified in Yellowstone. About 4/5 of the park's area is forested, and the vast majority of the tree growth consists of lodgepole pines. Among the several other conifer species in the park are whitebark pine, found at higher elevations, especially in the Absarokas, and Douglas firs, which dominate at lower elevations, notably in northern areas. Cottonwoods and willows grow along streams, and stands of aspens occur in many sections. Hundreds of types of wildflowers thrive in a variety of habitats. The earliest blossom in April, and the latest in September. Common species include phlox, lupines, cinquefoils, larkspurs, and Indian paintbrushes. Bison, grazing in Yellowstone National Park, northwestern Wyoming, U.S. Wolves in winter, Yellowstone National Park, northwestern Wyoming, U.S. wolves in winter. Yellowstone National Park, northwestern Wyoming, U.S. Animal life in Yellowstone is typical of the Rocky Mountain West, and the park boasts the greatest assemblage of mammals, more than 6 species, in the United States outside of Alaska. Bison, buffalo, the largest of the mammals, were brought back from near extinction at the beginning of the 20th century. They now constitute several thousand head divided into 2 subpopulations that, respectively, inhabit summer breeding grounds in the Hayden Valley, north central, and Lamar Valley, northeast areas of the park. Other large mammals often seen in Yellowstone include elk, wapiti, mule deer, black bears, foxes, and coyotes. There are smaller populations of brown, grizzly bears, bighorn sheep, pronghorns, mountain goats, and moose.